Oh, sorry. Okay, I froze a minute for there. Okay, so thank you so much, Maggie. I really appreciate inviting us to this space. And for those of you that maybe don't know me, I do work at the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault and am Maggie's coworker, but you probably don't get to see my face quite as often. I work on the resource sharing project on all of our rural grants. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those in a second. Olga, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Olga Trujillo, and what do I do? I'm an adult survivor of child sexual abuse, and I've been a consultant for many years working on issues around trauma and domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, human trafficking, and in particular of late talking more about DID, dissociative identity disorder. And I have been working as a consultant with Leah on the Building Resilience project. It's actually, I feel like that project really supported me through the pandemic, I'll just say.
I so agree. So Building Resilience that Olga just referenced is one of our rural projects at the Resource Sharing Project, where we're getting the opportunity to focus an entire training and technical assistance project just on helping rural programs understand the needs of adult survivors of child sexual abuse. I think it's something that all of us on the project feel really passionate about, and our work has brought us to spaces where we're just so excited to talk about that. And then sort of an added bonus, I think, to the project has been that I think when you center the needs of adult survivors of child sexual abuse in advocacy programs, it's easier to understand how to provide advocacy to all the survivors you're serving outside of the criminal legal system and really dive into what healing means to those folks. So we're both really excited to chat with you. We've also on this project moved away from using slides in our presentations, if maybe this looks different than previous webinars you have been on, because we really want it to feel like a conversation. We want all of you to get to feel like you can engage in this conversation with us. Olga and I just really like talking to each other also. So hopefully it will be interesting to hear us engage in conversation about our work. But I want you to feel like you're part of the conversation too. So raise your hand, jump in the chat box, ask your questions as they come up, share your own experiences. We want it to feel like we're getting to talk to all of you one-on-one.
Yeah, we both like to try to monitor the chat, so we'll bring in your comments and questions as it fits within our discussion or as they come up. But yeah, we totally welcome your input, your questions, your thoughts, because then it makes our information a lot more relevant to you. So.
Absolutely. We love going on a side tangent. We want to go where you want us to go. So this is part one of a two-part conversation. So in this conversation, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what we mean by child sexual abuse and how the experiences of violence in childhood can lead to the realities of a lived experience in adulthood. We're going to talk a little bit about like what healing in adulthood can look like for adult survivors of child sexual abuse, and then get into some conversation around what it means for you as an advocate and for your program, what all this information means. And then part two of our conversation in a couple weeks, we're going to dive really deep into dissociative identity disorder. And this is going to feel more like a conversation. And in a couple weeks for part two, I'm hoping it feels a little bit more like an interview, and we're going to get to ask Olga all the questions about dissociative identity disorder that you might have, and how it impacts your work, because Olga is amazing at talking about that and really helping you understand that experience and what you can do to help. So I think I'm really excited for part two. So
that's my favorite topic, sadly.
But we're in part one. So I feel like maybe a good place to start is just to to talk about what sexual abuse in childhood and how it differs from the experiences of folks who have experienced sexual violence for the first time in adulthood. Olga, when I bring up that topic, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you about those differences?
Yeah, trauma, because it's probably the first thing that comes to mind on anything. So the thing, I mean, there's trauma no matter what, right? So if someone is sexually abused or sexually assaulted for the first time as adults, there's trauma there. There's all kinds of changes in your life, in your body physiologically. But when you experience child sexual abuse and in particular trauma as a child, it really forms your life. Trauma then becomes part of your everyday, and so things that normally would happen for people who are not experiencing child sexual abuse don't happen or happen differently for people who are. So for example, child development happens differently. So because it affects everything, it affects your ability to trust people, it affects your integrity with your body, it affects your relationships with your family, even if they're not the ones that are causing the abuse. The fact that something happened to you when, kind of under their watch, right? Like while they're the ones who are supposed to be protecting you, it creates all kinds of disruption in those relationships. It changes your whole life. So you never know what it's like to feel safe, and you never know what you could have been without it. So it's really, really bad.
Yeah, when you say like it disrupts your life, then I feel like, or when you say it forms your life, I feel like what sexual violence for the first time in adulthood sort of disrupts everything you've known about yourself and your body and how you move through the world is deeply impacted and disrupted. But the difference then is when in childhood, it's like you don't even get to figure out who you were to begin with or what your life without the violence feels like, because when you experience sexual violence in childhood, like you're still very much, like you said, your brain is still developing, you're learning what boundaries are. I mean, you're literally learning concepts as fundamental to humanity as like, this is my body and this is your body. Like that's a literal concept you were learning in childhood. And so when someone disrespects your bodily autonomy, it really disrupts how you see yourself, and concepts of love and trust and boundaries all get wrapped up in all of it. And you often learn really messed up lessons of a skewed version of the world that then you don't have anything to compare it to. And so as you then grow up into adulthood, often through more trauma in adulthood or other forms of just unhappiness in various parts of your life, when you butt up against some of those things and realize, oh, maybe my concept.
So I think
I didn't
Leah
really
just.
There you go. No, did I pause again? Okay.
You froze just a little bit. Your concept of, and then
your concept of love, and maybe then realizing like, oh, maybe my concept of love is different than everyone else's, but you might have to learn that lesson so many times before you start to see it. And likewise, I think about when you experience violence in childhood, like you start using coping mechanisms and you don't reach for the best coping mechanism, the one that you want. You don't get a pick. You just grasp the first one that's available to you, no matter how healthy, unhealthy, desirable it is. You reach for something, and then that coping mechanism becomes like a second skin, like just the water you're swimming in. And so then in adulthood, it's really difficult to start to pinpoint when you're even using coping mechanisms like dissociation, because you're not having a tough moment and then calculatedly choosing to dissociate.
Right.
It's just happening. It's just automatic. It's like breathing. And so
Exactly.
trying to figure out what that feels like in adulthood is really complex, versus often when folks first experience sexual violence in adulthood, they might know what it feels like to live life without some of those coping mechanisms and are now adding those coping mechanisms to their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, but I want to kind of like, let me take a step back, Leah, because
Yeah.
I also don't want people to think, so it's really big. It's a big thing when you experience violence as a child and that trauma and how you move through the world. But it's also like people who, there's so many people that are adult survivors of child sexual abuse that you for sure know people, whether you know that or not. And we all, like, we're functioning, we're having our full life, and we're happy. We're creating a world for ourselves, you know, from the point that we start to, that we can move in, live in, and enjoy. It's just that we have some additional challenges that we deal with. So I wanted to just kind of make sure to address that, because I also don't want people to think that you know, the fact that someone was sexually abused as a child breaks them. I kind of hate that, like
Yeah.
broken people and like, it's just different. Like, it forms us, and trauma and all the things that we didn't learn because of the abuse, or we learned in a skewed manner because of the abuse, we have to, you know, we struggle with, and have to maybe relearn the appropriate, like for example, boundaries, like that you can set them, and that you can make sure that people follow them. There's just a lot. And then when you think when abuse happens within a family, that's also tricky, because those are the people who are supposed to help you develop.
Yeah.
So what other people have access to, which is, you know, family members that are helping them move through the world, like learning how to handle their feelings, recognizing that those feelings are intense, but they're going to be okay. You know, managing, like setting boundaries, being able to, like feeling connection and love to the other people that you live with, you know, in your home, your siblings, your parents, all that, without having fear attached to it. Um, all those things are tend to be missing from families where the abuse is happening in the home, because then there's someone who's causing harm in the home, and everybody, and it ripples out, whether people know it consciously or not. And so then you don't get a lot of the same development that other people do. And that's really important. It's a really important thing for advocates to know, because then what you're seeing in the behavior of adult survivors, oftentimes it can be like, you kind of look at it and you're like, well, that's weird, or why are they doing that? Or how come they don't have good boundaries? Or you may not know that they're an adult survivor, or they get mad, and they're just mad all the time, and they don't seem to control their anger, or they seem to target it at the advocate or whatever. You know, if you kind of think about it as like, well, you know, nobody taught them how to do that, and you know, nobody taught them how to set boundaries. In fact, when they did try to set boundaries, they might have gotten hurt because of it. The abuse might have been worse. So they, and like you said, Leah, that coping mechanism of dissociation just kicks in. So there's a lot of things that an adult survivor kind of loses out in that other people have. And on top of that, we don't know it. because we don't know what other people have really. We just can see the differences sometimes, and you don't know that the coping mechanisms that you're using, that they're even coping mechanisms, or that you're using them a lot of the time. So it's very, very, so it's not overstating it by saying that it's very, very different. They're both really awful, and
Oh, yeah.
but they're very, very different. And one of them really forms your life. And that's the stuff that happens to you as a child.
And of
I
course,
feel
it
like that was
also, and then of course, child sexual abuse also increases your risk for experiencing sexual violence in adulthood. Because when you're doing things like using dissociation implicitly, you're not always getting to choose what's happening to you or what situations you're in. When you have skewed concepts of what safety feels like in your body, or what kinds of people to trust in the world, or what love feels like, it can lead to vulnerability to be harmed then again in adulthood, re-triggering a lot of that child sexual abuse. We did some listening sessions with rural programs across the country at the beginning of the project to learn from advocacy programs about what they were seeing. And so much of what we heard from them is just the high prevalence of adult survivors of child sexual abuse that are already in services, that are being served by advocacy programs for violence that they experienced in adulthood, but don't super feel comfortable navigating talking about the child sexual abuse. Or some of the programs we talked to even mentioned that some adults had disclosed child sexual abuse, and then advocates tell us that they're not really sure what to do with that information. So it's just sort of not getting addressed in the advocacy. So it's really why we created our project, was that we wanted to be able to offer some of those answers for how then to navigate that. Because, you know, a concept I think that all the project partners for building resilience have talked a lot about is that there is in our movement and in our country, there is support for children that have been sexually abused. But so often I think we sort of forget that those children then grow up into adults and still have so much tied to the sexual abuse that they're navigating into adulthood. And so figuring out how to work those things out. And then another thing that you said, Olga, about like the violence happening in the home, I was also just thinking also about how many survivors we've spoken to, and we did a version of this presentation last month for folks in North Carolina, and we were talking about the prevalence of, like, even if you didn't experience the sexual violence in your home, that just living with your family when it happened, when you're under 18 and in someone else's care, how complex that can make your relationship to your family. A lot of survivors we've spoken to, you know, they start acting out, they are coping with the child sexual abuse the best way they know how, and often are getting punished from their family about like their bad behavior. And the family might not know that this is happening. They're not trying, you know, of course they're not trying to be bad parents, but just the idea that they're being punished for this behavior is really complex. And a lot of folks on that webinar were like, that was me, I was the problem child in my family, and just how complicated that makes your relationships with people that could be your support system in your community, just make it more complicated.
Yeah, I wanted to, Leah, I wanted to go back to something that you said to like kind of play out how that happens.
Yeah.
And so you were talking about kind of like the risk that comes up for people who've been sexually abused as children to be victimized again in adolescence, in a young adult, you know, really after the sexual abuse. And I kind of want to tease out how that happens or how that can happen. So, because it's a really important point, because oftentimes you're going to be working with someone who is a victim, an adult victim, who is not going to tell you that they were also victimized as children. And so I kind of want you to see how this happens. So So like a coping mechanism that a lot of people use that when they're abused is dissociation. And dissociation, allows people to leave their bodies and get through a really traumatic event. Anything traumatic. If the person survived it, they dissociated. But with sexual abuse, there's more. There's a little bit more dissociation, especially if it's ongoing sexual abuse. And so, what dissociation allows you to do is to not feel the extent of pain or all the feelings and all the emotions that are coming up for you at the time. So it might be panic that you're not feeling, or anger, or fear. So dissociation allows you to not feel that. So you have like a sense of kind of numbness. And the more and more that something happens to you, because that first time that happens, and that's your go-to place, that becomes like a coping mechanism, that becomes like your thing. And so the more and more that happens, the more and more you dissociate. And then you're honing that skill, which is an incredible skill to have. And almost everybody has it. Not everybody does, but almost everybody has it. So then what happens is somebody gets mad near you and it scares you, and then you dissociate. There's chaos in your classroom, or somebody gets in a fight and you get scared or angry, or any of those emotions come up, and then you dissociate. And so then you start to dissociate more and more, and you don't know that you're doing it, and you don't know that that's different from other people. So what ends up happening is the signals that your body sends you to like warn you that something's not safe, you're numbing out and you're not connecting it. Fear is a thing. There's a book written a long time ago, The Gift of Fear. Fear is a thing that indicates to you that something's not safe. If you dissociate first, you don't get that sense. So then you don't know that person's not safe. You don't have the response, the fight or flight response. You're basically going to freeze. And so what happens over time is that people will notice that in you. And the more and more that you're around people, the more and more that they might test. Because that's basically what happens with child sexual abuse and with sexual abuse in adolescence as well. It's oftentimes we know and actually as an adult too, oftentimes it's not violent, but there's a lot of grooming and testing that's happening. And when your coping mechanism is dissociation, then what you do is you comply. Because that's your survival technique. That's your coping mechanism. And so then there's more and more victimization. And then the more and more that's happening, the more and more that you dissociate. And then people who are looking to hurt someone look and test. And when they find you because you dissociate, or when they see that stare, then you become a target of theirs. So it's not anything that survivors are doing other than coping. And they learn to cope, but they don't know that's what they're doing, because no one said, hey, you're dissociating, that's coping. I mean, nobody says that to adults.
Yeah.
Except for me. I tell that to people all the time. Anyway, so that's the way that it connects. And so to me, dissociation is this amazing tool. But if you don't know how to use it, I live in the country, and we live on 12 acres. So I have a chainsaw and I know how to use it. I go get it when a tree falls down, and I cut the tree up and I move the thing. So I kind of think of dissociation like that. It's a really, really powerful thing. You can cut things up, it helps you pick really heavy things up and move them. But if you don't know how to use it, and you don't even know you have it, and it's just on, you can get hurt. So I don't know if that works. But.
That was a really good analogy that I thought started out as a threat. I thought it was like, I have a chainsaw and I know how to use it.
It's just that really powerful tool, right?
So we're about 30 minutes into this hour-and-a-half webinar. So I want to check before we maybe start moving a little bit towards what healing in adulthood looks like. I want to hear in the chat box, like, is this meshing well with what you know from your own advocacy? Are you starting to see survivors you've worked with in these descriptions? Do you have questions about, the realities of child sexual abuse and how folks cope, before we kind of move forward?
Yeah, and also I just wanted to point out, so Eric in the chat remembered the name, The Gift of Fear, and said that it's from Gavin de Becker, which is totally right. And he loves that book. It's been a long time since I read it, so I don't actually really remember anymore. This is the problem as you get older, I'll just say. But awesome. Other folks, yeah, any thoughts that you have or questions that you have, we'll go there. And then also, Leah, I had while we're waiting to see if we have, and I think you might have frozen again.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why that's happening. What were you going to ask me?
No. What I was going to say, there was another little piece that I wanted to connect, and I think we're kind of headed there, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But so dissociation is just one coping mechanism, but it's a really useful one for kids. But then there's just, and it looks differently. Like somebody might be watching TV all the time. Somebody might be reading books all the time. Somebody just doesn't come home, and they might, be in school, or after school stuff or whatever. But then there's stuff like you start to notice too that if you eat certain foods, that kind of helps you feel a little bit better. So then you end up eating more of that. Or as you get a little bit older, cigarettes really help because they help like sharpen your mind or give you enough energy, or like me, I started drinking when I was pretty young. So that was another way to kind of numb myself out. And all those things are coping. Like that's all legitimate stuff to do. And also I lifted weights. So I was numbing myself out through exercise. So it was good, but I would take it too far. And so those things take a toll on your body over time. So you'll find that people who are adult survivors of child sexual abuse also tend to have health issues, and chronic health issues is what I mean, like things like diabetes and high blood pressure and chronic pain, like fibromyalgia or Epstein-Barr or endometriosis. They get diagnosed with a lot of stuff if they go to the doctor, or they walk around with low energy and pain and chronic conditions.
Yes, Sarah in the chat box said, I think it's important to note that dissociation is automatic. It's not a conscious choice. Even babies do
Exactly.
it. It's a survival mechanism and it saves lives. And I think that that's how I feel, Sarah, about most coping mechanisms that survivors use, right? Like we don't get to pick what we're doing. Stuff just starts working. We start reaching for anything that's within our path and we use it to get through the moment, and don't necessarily have a choice about what we're picking. And it does work. It does save lives. It gets you through that moment. And then often what happens for child sexual abuse survivors is then into adulthood, when often you have the ability to put some distance between you and the person that's harming you in childhood. You might notice that the coping mechanisms that you used are no longer working for you, or like Olga shared, are starting to cause problems in your life. And I am all for using a coping mechanism until it starts getting in the way. Use any coping mechanism that's working for you, that saves your life, that's getting you through that moment. But often I find that when adult survivors of child sexual abuse start and, reach out for support, start to engage in advocacy programs, it's because they've stopped working. It's stopped being a good thing in their life, and they're starting to navigate, what could my life look like without this? Or like Olga shared, like getting to use dissociation when you want to be using it instead of when it's just happening to you, and getting to like actively choose what ways you want to cope in your life. I think that's, like you said, Olga, we're starting to get towards healing. Like, I think that's part of what navigating healing in adulthood looks like, is getting to choose how to move forward, getting to make choices about what you're using instead of things just happening to you. Now show us that, Mr. Incredible.
Yeah, so this is Mr. Incredible. And so this is what I think about when I think of dissociation. It's a superpower. And I don't know, I really like Mr. Incredible. So that's why I, have them around and show people. But it really is this superpower. It enables you to get through things that are, really hard to get through, and you survive them, and then you can hone that. And if you don't have to hone it, that's awesome. That's better. But if you do, it's a tool that you have in your toolbox. It's just learning how to use the tool so that you stay safe and healthy.
So I think maybe now is when we want to start talking about sort of what healing in adulthood looks like. And so this is like a visual that really works for me. And it's how I think about my own child sexual abuse, which is that, like, my child sexual abuse, I just put in a box and I shoved it to the back of my brain to get through the rest of my childhood, to get through into adulthood. And the healing process started for me as a place where I just needed to acknowledge that that box was back there. I couldn't keep ignoring that it was there. It was insistent, and it was causing problems in my adult life. And so I had to just sort of acknowledge that it existed back there. And slowly over time, it was like I'd pull that box out and just sort of look at it and be like, not today, and put it back. And eventually pulling it out and sort of peeking in and looking at what's in there. And over time, feeling the support and the confidence to sort of open that box and kind of look at everything that was in there, because everything that got put in that box by a child, and a child's understanding of what was happening. And so now I get to look at what's in that box from a fully developed brain that knows a lot about trauma, has been to therapy, has a community of support, that now I get to look at everything I put in that box in a new light, and start pulling things out of the box and really looking at all those things in the sunlight and deciding how I felt about all of those things, seeing it with like a new eye. And I feel like that's really what so much of advocacy can look like, is just being with someone as they kind of open up their box and figure out in adulthood what those relationships mean now, how I think, I've been on this healing journey for a while now, and I'm still, learning new things, putting pieces together, like mashing things up, making connections to how I think, how I move about the world, what my relationships to other people look like based on what's in that box. I think a pretty good example of this is like that I really struggled with boundaries for a really long time, because my boundaries were not respected in childhood. And the secrecy of the sexual abuse just felt really awful. It felt disgusting. It weighed on me. And so then in adulthood, I was able to like name that feeling and recognize that I didn't want to feel that. And so I started talking about the sexual abuse to other people, being open about it, not keeping it secret, because I didn't like that feeling. But then I ran into this problem that suddenly anything that I wanted to keep as a secret, or not even a secret, but just wanted to keep to myself, or my own private thoughts or feelings or experiences, they started to feel like secrets and started to like get covered in the gunk of all of that. And so I didn't want to feel that way. So I just started living my life boundaryless and sharing everything with everyone, and not setting limits about what I was going to share with who or in what settings, because I needed to not feel that feeling. I needed everyone to know everything. And so it took me years to make the connections between like why I was so bad at boundaries and the sexual abuse, and how that like felt in myself. And then start working slowly towards figuring out like what does a healthy boundary feel like? How, what are the decision making process I'm going to create for myself so that I know what feels like a good boundary and what feels bad. And that's kind of an example of like looking at what was in that box that a child put in the box and now getting to look at it from an adult's perspective and using my community and all the knowledge I've built up about trauma to figure out what feels good then in adulthood.
Mhm. That's an awesome description. So just a kind of a couple things that like from your discussion that kind of match mine. So one is that healing is not linear. It kind of happens all over the place. You know, you could make big progress in healing and go. And then you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to stop for a while. And then you might go backwards a little bit and you might take a step to the side. And then you might come back to it and do a little bit more healing. And healing looks really, really different. And it needs to look really, really different. A one size fits all healing approach doesn't really work for everybody. And what happens is when you have a one size fits all healing approach, which I'll just say most of the time people think, oh, you need to have talk therapy. If you do, like, that worked for me, it was awesome, but it doesn't work for everybody. And if that's the only thing that you can say to people, oh, for healing, then those people who it doesn't work for don't have any options. But there's all kinds of cultural healing that's very traditional in cultural groups that are incredibly healing. And then also all the people that we talked about, that we talked to in the Building Resilience project, some people talked about therapy. I think I talked about therapy the most because I think I'm the oldest for sure. And also, I had DID and my therapeutic process was really intense. But there were lots of people that had that the common denominator really was building community and having a safe place where they felt accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And that is totally something that we can help people do in our work. So it's really, really kind of a little bit all over the place, and it's all based on the person. Just like trauma is very subjective and based on the person that's experiencing it, healing is too.
Yeah, I think the two that we always went back to as we had all these conversations with survivors and everyone in the project around our own survivorship was building community, because everything we just said about sort of what the violence in childhood looks like and the ways it impacts love and trust and boundaries and safety, those are all really big elements of building relationships with other people. And then the other that I think we focused on a lot is like the connection to the body. And so bringing the body back into the healing process, because that's, I think, a good example of the ways that, talk therapy rarely can be the only thing someone is engaging in the healing process, because it's just something you can't sit in a space with someone else and articulate and navigate. There's a lot of the body that has to be like brought back into the process. And so a lot of the people in our project and a lot of people we've talked to have shared like being in nature, hiking, being in water, just learning to be in your body again. Olga, you always share this, the example about like, about how hardcore basketball player you were in childhood. Will you talk about that? Because I really feel like that's such a good example of kind of what that looks like then in adulthood to heal that piece.
Yeah, well, and it was a little bit, so one of the coping mechanisms that I had was through sports. So started playing basketball on a team when I was in second grade, but also I started running, I played softball, I ran track. And then that was my go-to escape, really. And, but because I was dissociating all the time, the only times that I would feel like I was in my body was when I was doing activities like that. But the problem is because I would go to dissociation really regularly, I wouldn't feel my body very much. So like um, I would run and run and run and not realize that I was creating stress fractures in my feet until weeks later, because I would be so disconnected from my body. But the so that was one way in which kind of like I used dissociation and being disconnected from my body kind of became a problem for me. But then when I started kind of going through, a healing process and learning to center myself and what it felt like to be in my body, then I would try to experience what I was doing more. So I would do, and then I would use that in my healing. So I would use running, for example, and with each step, imagining that I was stepping on the people that hurt me, for example, and that would feel really powerful. And then I would feel myself in my body, and I would feel more capable. And then when I would go work out in the gym and I would do bench press, I would pretend that I was hitting people. Of course, I wouldn't say this to any of the people that I was working out with, but I would pretend I was hitting people with the barbell. And that would feel really powerful, and I would feel myself in my body. So I started kind of doing more and more like that. But also when I was little, it was also a way, I kind of have to watch how people use like the different coping mechanisms that they use, because like what I would do, some people use cut themselves and stuff to feel something because they're dissociating so much. Um, and what I would do is I would be reckless with my body. And I think that's the story that you're remembering, Leah, is that I would play basketball and I wouldn't really feel like I was in my body. I was going through the motions, and I'd be really and all the people I played with were way taller than me, but I would out scrap them. I would jump as high as I could, grab that ball, and I would land on my knees. And that would be the kind of self-harm that I would do. Then I would feel like I was in my body. So I was doing a lot of stuff like that I learned then to be careful. Like when I really was in my body, I learned
Mhm.
how to not do that, like how to be in my body without having to have pain to bring me back into my body.
Yeah,
So
I
if
mean,
that makes any sense.
as we're talking about, as Sarah said, dissociation is automatic. It's not a conscious choice. It becomes really difficult but doable to try to be in your be in your body and feel your body.
Yeah.
And so often the ways that folks do that are to engage in some of those processes and check in with themselves. And it takes a long time. But for me, I started swimming laps and just feeling like the water on my
Yeah.
skin. And it would just bring me so much joy. Like I think I've told you before that like the first time I went swimming laps in adulthood, I like I couldn't like put my head all the way underwater to swim the laps because I was smiling so big that like water would get in my mouth. And it was like finding things that like my body really enjoyed and doing some of that self-talk while I'm doing it of like, this is what my body is made for. It's not made for anybody else's pleasure. It's to do things that make me happy and bring me joy and feel strong and in control of my body. And, like you said, it's not linear. There's times when it's harder to do that, and there's times when it's easier, and it's sort of practicing that. And,
Yeah. And
and it,
those, those old things, like I go back to those things, like that feeling, like, so we were talking about building community, right? For healing, and then taking kind of control, being in your body, second one. And then the third one, I think there is, oh shoot, I just lost it. Um, oh, I can't find it. But there's a third, being able to have, making choices, making decisions, like being in control of your life. Like, and so those are things that I still go back to. So a year and a half ago when the pandemic started, and, that was really, really hard for lots and lots of people. And for the first month, I felt kind of a little bit paralyzed. And then I decided I have a bike. I'm gonna, because I usually travel a lot and I was home all the time. And I decided I'm gonna try, because this thing, exercise always helped me feel better for some reason, when I was growing up. And I thought, I'm gonna try riding my bike. And I am about to turn 60, and I had not ridden a bike since I was in my 30s. I just happened to have one, and I started riding my bike. And the first day I rode my bike, and I just got up our driveway, and then I turned around and came back. But once I started doing that again, it was like an old friend. It was really comforting to me to be able to rely and build strength in my body. Um, so it is very, it's not linear, and it's these little things that you can collect. Like I didn't do therapy over the past year to try to deal with what was going on, because that wasn't really where my healing really, was going to take me. I did my bike, and I love it now. Now I go out almost every day, and some days I'm out there for 90 minutes. I live in a rural area, so I can ride on roads. There's hardly any traffic, and I see sandhill cranes, and I see swans and deer. It's just magical. But it all started with this old thing that I used to do, and the healing feelings of being in your body.
Yeah, I learned how to ride the bike. I learned how to ride a bike kind of again in adulthood this last summer, and it was oddly so emotional. It's like something that's like very connected to childhood, I feel like, and just riding down a hill, that like freedom and the like wind. I don't know. There's just something so visceral that's hard to explain about the sensations you feel in your body when you're riding a bike, and it was something that my partner and I would do a lot before bed every night, and then we come home and I would almost always cry at some point and feel really emotional. And so it felt actually really like I was using both, because I would do something that made me feel really connected to my body, and when I would come home and feel emotional, I was tapping into my community. My partner would be someone that would be like, it's okay, you don't need to, because I kept going to my like work brain and being like, I need to exactly understand why it's making me feel emotional. And he would just be like, you don't need to know, you're allowed to just feel emotional. You don't have to make the like logical connection so that you can explain it to someone in a webinar. You're allowed to just feel emotional about it in your of like feeling in your body right now, and let the emotion pass. So I felt like I was really using both.
I'm curious, just if folks feel like sharing, if this like sounds like anything that's ever happened to them, like going back to something that they used to do when they were a kid, when they're having a tough time, and finding comfort and healing in that. So just curious, if you feel like entering into the chat, let us know. I'll keep an eye on it, and I'll let you know. And then there was something I was just about to tell you, Leah. Oh yeah. So when you think that healing is really kind of comes from these different ways, right? So most people tell us about building community, about really feeling like themselves in their body and feeling, connected to their body. So not just kind of like separated. And then for me, and I think for you as well, like having choice, being able to make decisions, having control over your life. If you think that that's the way that we can accomplish healing, then it's not really hard to help adult survivors of child sexual abuse, because these are all things that advocates can help people with. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so much also about like building a relationship with someone over time. Like when you take into consideration all the things we said about how complicated it is to create and sustain relationships, and know what trust feels like and boundaries and all of that. If someone walks in the door for advocacy services, like they're not going to be able to just sort of like plop their whole life story in front of you so easily, I think, or not always, or sometimes when survivors would do that, it's because they've been shunted through so many systems. I feel like they've just been taught, this is what I'm supposed to do. And in a disaffected way. I'm not having a real genuine connection with you and talking about my life. I'm just sort of laying all my diagnoses on the table and letting you know, like, here's what you're going to deal with. And so I have found that like building that relationship with someone over time, like actually actively bringing trust into the relationship, figuring out what safety with each other feels like, not even necessarily talking about the abuse at all, but just the beginnings of a relationship with a human being. That's, I think, so much of what the beginning of an advocacy relationship with an adult survivor of child sexual abuse can feel like, to not have an agenda when you walk into the meeting with someone, but instead build that connection. And likewise, that person is building up their own feelings of like, what does trust feel like? And what does safety feel like? And all of those things. And then over time, I think, you know, you start to share with more about each other. And I think as an advocate, the thing that I love to bring to the table is curiosity. It's what I want to bring in my advocacy practice. And it's what I bring to my like interpersonal relationships, is noticing things and saying like, well, is this a connection for you? Or how do you feel about this? Or tell me more about this. Like just being curious with the person, because I feel like that's the gentlest way I've felt like I know how to move forward with myself, instead of like adding a judgment to something, but instead just being curious. Why am I crying after I ride a bike? I'm just gonna gently ask myself that question and not need to have a good answer or an answer right now, but just it's a question in the air for me to like navigate.
Yeah, and I know like there's something that you said that kind of brought up a memory for me and kind of rings true for sure for me. So whenever I go someplace new, I tend to observe more than interact. I mean, I might go through the perfunctory things that I have to do, but I don't share a whole lot about myself, and I just kind of observe. And so I could see a survivor, an adult survivor, going to an advocacy program and, you know, not really wanting to say a whole lot, but just kind of observing and building and having a rapport that gets built over time, right? And then you'll keep going. And I found that I did this a lot. So I didn't go to advocacy services because I was abused over an extended period of time, pretty regularly. I was dissociating quite a bit, and I would put it someplace else, and I wouldn't remember what had happened to me. So as a young adult, as an adolescent and a young adult, I'm walking around with all the coping mechanisms of having been abused without the knowledge of having been abused, and then getting triggered and not really understanding my behavior. Like, why would I have such a hard time with that? Or I would just dissociate. I get triggered and I dissociate. But there were things that I would do that were comforting to me. So I joined teams. So I was part of a community of people who, you know, I played basketball, I played softball, I ran track. And so I would join teams, and then I would go when there weren't teams for me to join, or when I was off season, I would go to the gym and I would join classes, or I would join a group that was working out together. And all those things were really like helped me feel like I belonged somewhere. And it wasn't like I was asking for anything, or I was developing relationships with those people in a setting that didn't focus on me. It focused on what we were doing. And that made it a lot easier for me. And I think we have a question. Oh, no, that's you.
That was me. I just wanted to put in the chat box. Everyone's being very quiet. And so either that means that they're holding back on their questions and I'm just trying to find ways to pull it out, or they think we're brilliant and they just want to be quiet so that we can just keep talking. So feel free to weigh in the chat box how you're feeling. Ask your questions. We want to make sure this is working for your what you came here to
Thanks,
get
Mary.
from us. Thank you, Mary. We are brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. So that piece, like, I think like instinctively we kind of go to places that are providing us things that we needed. And then, but what's really cool is that like advocates could actually know this is something that's really helpful for people and build that kind of into what they do. The other thing that I think is really helpful too is giving people information. Like when I started learning about trauma and how it affects, how I move through the world, like it was really powerful. In fact, I just kept going. Like I'm still learning and I'm still exploring it. And I'm still thinking about it. Like I became really kind of obsessed with it.
Yeah, I mean, it goes right back, I feel like, to that curiosity piece. And I feel like so much of like, and I feel like maybe this is the direction we're starting to leave a little bit of part two of like what's healing in adulthood look like, and starting to dive into sort of what's an advocate's role in navigating that healing. And I feel like it's being exploratory and collaborative and curious. And I think part of that is education, is like using your own knowledge of trauma and child sexual abuse to then, like, as you're having these, lengthy relationships with adult survivors of child sexual abuse, and get to know each other more and hear more about their life, starting to be curious or put some pieces together and just say, like, you shared this and it starts to feel connected to maybe this other piece. Can I talk to you more about what that feels like? Or do you see some of those connections between the pieces? And I feel like the education part feels like can just feel really profound, being able to put like naming parts of your survivorship,
Yeah.
making connections, hearing from other survivors and what they're struggling with or what they're navigating, and then realizing and recognizing parts of that in yourself. It's kind of like when, I'm part of the queer, we're both part of the queer community, and just like when you can have a name for it, of like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm a lesbian, or I'm bisexual, or I'm queer, like suddenly so many of my, you didn't fix my whole life, but so many of my questions and my fears kind of go out the window, because this is a thing that exists and there's other people like me, or that are dealing
Yeah.
with this or have these connections. And so just that like education piece and being able to understand parts of child sexual abuse and parts of trauma experienced in childhood, and what that looks like then.
Yeah. And I found it like huge for me because I felt like it gave me a little bit of control. Like I understood how trauma worked. So when these things would happen to me, those were flashbacks. And so something happened that triggered me. So then what was that? So then I started being able to identify what kinds of things are triggering for me, and then what I can do with that. So like there's some things that I just don't do because they're too triggering and I don't care enough about them. Like going to a professional football game and being around a bunch of people that are drinking and yelling and screaming, even though yelling and screaming and excitement about something good or bad on the field, that was too triggering for me. And I would then have panic attacks and flashbacks. And I was like, okay, so I did that once. It wasn't really all that great. I'd rather watch it on TV if I'm going to watch it. Um, you know, it was like, but then there are things like being on an airplane feels closed in, and feeling closed in feels like being sexually abused. And that was a big deal to me because I wanted to be able to take vacations. I traveled a lot for work. So then I had to figure out how to manage that. How do you manage the, how do you unhook the trigger? And when you can't unhook the trigger, how do you manage the response? Those were all huge, huge lessons for me. And it enables me to move through the world pretty seamlessly now. But it wasn't like learning that happened necessarily in a therapy session. it was learning that happened over time. It started in therapy sessions and then was talking to other people, meeting other people that had traumatic experiences as well, reading things, watching videos. But I said, I'm a little obsessed by it.
So Maggie asked in the chat box, many advocates have expressed to me that they feel not equipped to hold this space, that deeper conversations are reserved for formal therapists. Can you speak to the power of advocacy? So the first thing that came to my mind when you asked this, Maggie, because I so freaking relate to that, is that I used to work at Waypoint back before the Iowa restructuring, where we served both domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. And we had about 10 advocates on staff, and 9 of us worked with domestic violence survivors, and 1 advocate worked with sexual assault survivors. Her name was Nellie. She's pretty cool. I feel like for so many of us that worked with domestic violence survivors, or at least I can say to myself, this is how I felt, is like, I knew what I was supposed to be doing when I was doing domestic violence work. And specifically, I was doing housing work. And so it's like, I'm finding someone housing, I'm working with folks in shelter, getting protection orders. But I never really, I was like running all over the city and meeting with lots of people. And Nellie was mostly in her office with survivors that would like come in for, bits of time to check in with Nellie and have a relationship with her. And I never understood what was happening in that room with Nellie and the survivor. That part of advocacy, that like intangible, that like building a relationship with someone, that like you said, like holding that space, I didn't understand how to do it. It didn't feel like it was the training I was taught, and I wasn't really sure what it looked like. And I really wanted to be a fly on the wall in that room. And for me, I think that the farther then I went in my advocacy and in this movement, I figured out that for me to understand how to do what Nellie was doing, was the first step for me was figuring out how to find my like authentic self and my authentic voice in conversations with survivors, because I was quite young when I first started advocacy. And I really felt like I was supposed to put on this like this idea I had of professionalism in these spaces, where I wasn't supposed to bring like my heart into spaces. I was supposed to distance myself from this person and just sort of be like a information dispensing robot. Is the best way I know how to describe that. And so once I just sort of allowed myself to be present in those meetings and speak like I speak in the world, like this is a pretty casual conversation, we're being real people. This is how I like to approach advocacy too, is being my true self, because I think also so many adult survivors of child sexual abuse, just from the violence in childhood, have this like laser vision to know when you're not being yourself, you're not being authentic, to know when there is a facade or you're not being truthful or fully honest about who you are, because that's like a safety thing for children, right? And so once I just started to really feel like I embodied myself in these interactions and was talking with survivors as I would talk with any person in my community that came in and had questions or wanted to build a relationship with me, that's where I feel like that I just feel like I flipped a switch or something, and I suddenly knew how to just be in space with people and interact with them the way that I interact with anyone in my community who I love. Olga, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah. So there's like, I feel like, so like just listening and just like you don't need to fix things for adult survivors. In fact, you can't fix things, but just listening and being curious is powerful. It's really, really powerful. You're probably going to be one of the first people or only people that they tell that they're a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And then your response being welcoming, being accepting, understanding that that's really hard, that it was probably really hard for them to tell you. All that stuff is huge, and it's hugely helpful. And the one thing I learned from years and years of, going through a healing process with a really, really skilled psychiatrist who specialized in DID is that connections are really significant, and that you don't really need to have people like know what to do with the information. You mostly need to have a witness for some of the things that you're struggling with. And most people don't want to tell you the details of what happened to them. It's triggering to talk about it a lot of times, but they just want you to know that stuff happened, and how it affects them. And bearing witness to that is powerful for folks. And then also, you have access to so much information that people don't have access to. I mean, especially when you think of the stuff that we're developing in the building resilience curriculum. And then there's lots more stuff that you have access to that comes across your desk all the time, or your emails, that people don't know. And so being someone that, has access to that kind of information, say, oh yeah, I have this thing that talks about trauma, or I have this thing that talks about why it's hard to go to the doctor when you've experienced violence, and it makes sense. And, I can give you a copy of that, or you can talk people through it. Like, that is huge. That is bigger than anything else. I do a lot of trainings for lawyers who are working with sexual assault survivors. And I talk a lot about trauma-informed legal advocacy, and how they really need to think about their work kind of in two ways: their work with the client by itself, and then the thing that they're trying to accomplish with the client. So they can't just think about what they're trying to accomplish with the client and measure their success by whether they win or lose that. Because there's the work with the client, and they have a lot of control over that. And there's a lot that they can provide that client in the way that they work with them. They, building rapport, building trust, providing information, being in a space that creates, and in a relationship that creates emotional safety, because then when they have that with them, they can do it with somebody else. Providing information in different modes of learning so they can remember it, strategizing with someone how to, get through what you're trying to help them get through, like creating checklists and, having little small tasks and keeping things simple, like all those things, which are the kinds of things that happens when you're talking to someone, you're interacting with someone. Those things are absolutely huge. And if they never go to trial, or if they don't win the case, those things that can be out of the person's control, they have succeeded with that person by changing the way that that person has worked with someone. And then they're more likely to seek help when they need it in the future. There's so many people that treat adult survivors of child sexual abuse as though there's something wrong with them, or they're weird, or, we're used to hearing stuff like that. We're used to being treated like we're too much, like we talk too much, like we do, we're too hard, we're prickly, or we need to have control, or we're manipulative. There's all kinds of ways that people talk to people who are adult survivors of child sexual abuse. But when you're treated with respect and kindness and thoughtfulness, it's huge, and it changes people's lives. And then, people that do that, it's so powerful. You have people that will come back to your program and volunteer. You will have people that will do peer support. You will have people that will want to be part of support groups, because that is such a powerful gift, to be listened to and considered and then, you know, being taken seriously and providing information. And a lot of times that doesn't necessarily happen in a therapeutic process. And also they figure, well, that person has to be that way with me. Like I get a lot of questions from people who have really good therapists, and they don't believe the therapist because they feel like the therapist is trying to get them to do something. And they believe the other people that have been through it. So it's like there's so much you can do as an advocate to help people that you know, to work with people that have their adult survivors of child sexual abuse, and very little of it involves more than listening and talking.
Someone asked in the chat box, one question a survivor asked me is, did his sexual preferences change because he was sexually abused as a child? I have a lot of complicated feelings about this. We've never talked about this specifically, I don't think.
Do you want to start or?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I have so many complicated as soon as I read that question.
It's a really good question though, because
question.
survivors struggle with this, and the people close to survivors struggle with this.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
Okay, so I hope I'm not gonna undo my own boundaries, but I'm just gonna say that for me, when I think about this question about my own life, I identify as bisexual currently. But I think that's how I've always been as a human. But I think when I was younger, because of the child sexual abuse, I did not feel safe, emotionally safe, acknowledging the attraction I had to men. And so I identified as a lesbian. I had exclusively romantic relationships with women. And I don't think that you can fake sexual attraction. Like, I don't think there was ever a part of me that was like, men hurt me, so I'm going to choose to be with women because they're safer. I don't think you can just choose that, right? But there is a part of me that I could ignore. And only then in adulthood, in therapy, in conversations with my queer community, have I gotten to a place where I feel comfortable and emotionally safe acknowledging that I'm not a lesbian, but I'm bisexual, and that I have those feelings for men. So if the question is sexual preferences, meaning what gender you're attracted to specifically, I don't think that your sexual preferences change because you were sexually abused. However, I do think that when you think of the concept of sexual preferences in general, about like what kind of sex you like to have or what turns you on, I do think also that it can, because often when you're being sexually abused, your body, without your permission, is becoming turned on so that you can be safe, physically safe, and not as physically harmed in that moment. And there is a neural pathway that's created then. And so I've spoken with a lot of adult survivors who then in adulthood, their sexuality, not meaning like who they're sexually attracted to, but the kind of sex they like to have, sometimes has an element of violence or elements of the abuse. And so then in adulthood, what it looks like navigating that is finding ways to act out your sexual preferences in ways that feel emotionally safe to you. So in early years, maybe before you're acknowledging the sexual abuse, before you're sort of opening up that box and looking inside and figuring it out, you might be having sex with people, survivors might be having sex with people that are really unsafe, that they are engaging in some of that, like some of those violent fantasies, but not obtaining consent first, and not creating a plan around what feels okay and what doesn't. But then in adulthood, as you start to open up the box and name those things and figure those things out for yourself, then I know a lot of child sexual abuse survivors who engage in the BDSM and kink community where there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of structure. It is all based around consent, and you have really lengthy conversations with the people that you're having sex with about what's okay, what's not okay, what's going to happen, what's our plan for if something comes up and you become triggered, how are we going to navigate that, like creating a safe space for you to navigate what that sexual preference might be. That's my initial thoughts, but Olga, we've never talked about this. How do you feel about those things?
Those are awesome, awesome thoughts. So I agree with you wholeheartedly in both things. So I don't think so I'm queer, but I'm also almost 60 and I grew up in a Catholic Latinx home. So and my go-to thing wasn't acting out, was riding under the radar and also not being a problem for my mom in particular. So I was really good. I followed all the rules. I tried really hard in school. So at the point and when once I started realizing what happened to me, I was a lawyer. I was working at the Department of Justice, and I was married to a man who is an incredible person. And I'm very, very grateful that I had him in my life and that I was married to him when all this started. And then also that he's still in my life now as a really good friend. And so, and the thing is I have always been attracted to women, and there are lots of men that I have met and that I love, but I've never really been attracted to them. But I thought that I was supposed to, and I never really knew anything, like, because, the level, so my abuse happened in my home by my father and my brothers. And so there was a lot that we never talked about, that I didn't learn, that I just kind of went through life kind of trying to figure out and watching other people. And so I had a good set of friends, some of which were lesbians, but none of them were out when I was growing up. So we were all just kind of doing what we thought we were supposed to be doing. So I don't know, because my abuse started so young that I don't know if the abuse influenced me or not. I think not, because I was married to a man. I worked with a male psychiatrist. When my relationship ended, I was with another guy. And then I realized that this really wasn't doing it for me, that I'm really attracted to women. And so then I came out, and then I'm like slowly coming out in all sorts of ways. Then I started letting people know that I had DID because I was in the healing process. And then I would conform before. So I also came out in terms of being non-binary and being not just one, but being a they, them, and not being necessarily a she, because, and that again, I don't know how much of that is affected by having DID. I think a lot of it probably is affected by having DID, because I have parts, and I've moved through the world as if I knew, and I've talked about having parts, but I never connected the gender. I never wanted to let people know that my gender identity was not really she, her identity. And that all of those things have happened for me in my life. Like I knew that really young, that I didn't feel like a she, her, like really young. But, and when I trace my thoughts back, I could always connect that. But I think that in large part was because I started creating parts when I was 3 years old. So there were more parts inside of me. But all of those things have happened as I've gotten more comfortable with myself, as I've done more healing, And as I've created more and more community that I feel safe in. Um, and and I think that it's really kind of hard to know and hard to answer that question. And I honestly don't think it matters. I honestly think that, like, the way I think about things now, and I have for many years now, is it doesn't, I just want to be happy. Like, I want to do things and be the way I can that brings me joy. Um, so, so I don't know
I
if
mean,
that helps in talking to advocates. I mean, talking to survivors about it.
yeah, I mean, I think that exactly what you said is, I think so much about this is also the role of an advocate, if someone asks you that question, might be in helping someone navigate the grief at never really getting to know a true scientific answer to that question. That's kind of part of what we're saying about what the difference between the violence in childhood versus first experienced in adulthood is that you don't get to know who you were going to be, that then maybe
Right.
in adulthood with violence you get thrown off course, but you never got to know who you were supposed to be to begin with, and letting go of that grief and moving past it.
And I wanted to jump back in for a second, Leah, because I wanted to talk a little bit about what you, and I know we don't have very much time left, but people don't talk about this very much. So I really want to go back to the sex part of it, the sexual preferences in your consensual relationships. And so it is, I do believe that that changes based on the abuse, and exactly for the reasons that Leah said, because your body responds in order to protect you. And so these are the things that you know. So then really, like, helping people kind of be okay with, but that's not abusive now if they've decided to take that back. So for me, I took back my sexual relationships with people, and I wanted to make sure that I enjoyed sex. And so, and for me, a lot of the violence stuff wasn't actually all that appealing to me, but there were some aspects of like feeling trapped, but not really trapped. Um, feeling seduced, but being seduced, like, with someone who I wanted to be seduced with, like things like, so the key for me was to once be like, okay, so these are the things that I enjoy. And that might be because these things happen to me, but I can change those and still get pleasure out of them and have control over them, and make sure I'm doing them with safe people, make sure it is consensual, make sure that at any point in time I can stop. And that is an additional kind of like powerful element in healing, is being able to take back the pleasure that was kind of exploited.
I've also worked with a lot of survivors that it took them a while to figure out that maybe some of those elements that we're talking about turn them on, or parts of their sexuality they want to explore. And so they keep exploring that in the real world with partners. But it took them a long time to figure out that it's something that they only want to live in their head.
Right.
That there isn't a way for them to explore those things in a way that feels safe and empowering for them, but it's a thing that they get to explore in their own mind when they're having sex with themselves. But when navigating it with a person in the world, it just never is going to work out. And like the power of getting to figure out that and make that decision for yourself.
So Leah, this is a really important question. And Maggie, I want to ask, can we have a couple extra minutes to be able to answer this question that's in the, that's been asked?
Yeah, absolutely. I will put the evaluation link in the chat box, and then whenever, if people have to leave at 3:30, then they're welcome to leave, but we can keep going.
Yeah, cool. Okay, because this is really, really important, because this happens, and I, when I have done my presentation about the abuse that I experienced, I walk through how that worked for me in my head. So the question is, Can you discuss the dynamic sometimes present in incest where the survivor says they sometimes initiated sex even into adulthood with their abuser? So here's kind of how it worked for me. And I think this is a really common coping mechanism. So the first sexual abuse I experienced was when I was 3, and my initial response was to fight. And then I was overpowered and I panicked, and then I dissociated. All right. So then I was abused, and so that would be basically what would happen is I would resist, and then I would panic, and then I would dissociate. And then after a little bit, I stopped resisting and I would just dissociate. And then I would stop, and then I would still, and then after a little while, I would start accommodating. So I would comply with the abuse because it was just easier. And I wasn't consciously thinking of these things. I was instinctively doing them. This felt safer. This felt like what I do. And so then I'm not resisting. I'm not fighting back. I'm not resisting, and I'm complying. So I'm not going to the person, but when the person comes, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I do that. Okay. And then over a period of time, I got to the point where I would get triggered when I would be in a setting that matched when I was sexually abused. And when I was triggered, I would feel a sense of panic. And then I would remember how I got rid of the panic. And the way I got rid of the panic was through the sexual contact. So then I would find the person that triggered me, and I would initiate the sexual abuse. Now, I was not thinking to myself, I wanted to have sex. I was not thinking to myself, let me get this over with. I was merely trying to stop the panic. And I was automatically responding to what had been done in the past. And I did that as a kid, I did that as an adolescent, and I did that as a young adult. And I did that into my 20s. And so that is until you can unhook that trigger with that response, it will be your response, not because you want to do that, but because that is what the sexual abuse, that's what you were taught to do to survive. So that's a coping mechanism that enabled you to survive when instinctively you knew there'd be a lot of harm if you didn't do it. And then that becomes your coping mechanism when even somebody you don't know triggers you because they're doing something similar to what that person did. And again, you may initiate without actually wanting to have sex with that person. So it's part of that coping, and it's connected to the polyvagal theory, which is the fight, flight, or freeze response, and how your brain then adjusts for survival.
I think it's such a good example of this thing that you and I sometimes talk about, that you don't in adulthood just have to sometimes heal from the sexual abuse in childhood, but also sometimes there's a lot of healing that needs to be done around the coping mechanisms that you used as a result of the abuse, because sometimes it can feel, for a lot of the survivors that I've talked to, it feels even a more complicated thing to heal from because you feel partially responsible for it, because it feels like a decision you made versus the abuse was not a decision you made, but how you coped in adulthood feels like something that you made a decision about. And so there's often even higher levels of shame and discomfort and just more to heal from there.
And the tactics that abusers use are intended to make you feel that way. So grooming, for example, like I'm just gonna put my hand on you and I'm gonna wait and see. And I'm just gonna put my hand on you and I'm gonna wait and see. And then you don't do anything because they're put their hand someplace else. And then, so it's like slowly encroaching on your personal space, on your body, then inappropriate touching. and then sex acts, right? So it happens really subtly, and you're not supposed to react. And if you do react, then they're like, oh, I was just doing this, you know? So these things are really tactics that are intended to make you feel like this is something you participated in, as opposed to something done to you. But as kids, this is not something that we want. This is not where we go. And then over time, though, this is what we're taught of how to survive. So yeah, so it's really, really important, the way, and this is why I wanted to go over, to be able to describe to someone, like, why would a 3-year-old or why would a 5-year-old, like, does that make sense that you would want to have sex at that point? Like, how would you even know? And once you start thinking about it that way, then you can see, oh yeah, but this was what you were taught to do because this is how you survived. Cool. Okay, so there's a couple more things in the chat. Survivors initiate abuse. Thanks, Sarah. So often for a variety of issues, for approval, for love, for acceptance, for empowerment. Yep, that's also things that they're taught to do as well. Like that there is safety if you're doing the thing that they've been doing to you for years and years. Yep, really good point. And of course, Leah already said that. So I think we're out of time, right?
Yep. Maggie, is there anything else that folks should know before we end?
Yeah, and thank you both so much for this incredibly fruitful conversation. And we will continue our part 2 exactly 2 weeks from today, the same time, 2 to 3:30. So I will send out another reminder link, registration link, and all of that good stuff, probably tomorrow. And then if you just don't mind, as soon as you exit the Zoom, you'll get the evaluation link. If you could complete that for us, that would be wonderful. But thank you, Olga. Thank you, Leah. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Maggie, for having me. And
Thank you. This was awesome. You asked great questions.
Bye, everyone.
yeah.